So climate change. It's this big, scary global issue. Scientists are now telling us we really only have about 12 years to dramatically reduce global emissions. And with stats like that, it's really easy to feel overwhelmed and discouraged. How can one person possibly make a difference when the challenge is so vast and so large? That's the question a group of environmental activists right here in Austin, Texas, started asking themselves a few years ago. And so they sat down and they realized that the majority of our emissions are coming from electricity. And so they started pushing our elected officials, our city council, to make some big investments in wind and solar. They started going to city council meetings, writing letters to their city council members. And today, because of their efforts, Austin is on track to get 65% of its energy from renewables by 2027. And in 2017, it was announced that Austin alone is responsible for nearly 40% of all the solar power installed throughout the entire state of Texas. That's right. And so that is an impact that goes way beyond our borders right here in Austin. That's an impact that can be felt throughout the entire state of Texas and throughout the entire world, because there are mayors who have traveled here to see what we're doing and bring those lessons back to their own communities. And this huge impact is something that can really be attributed to the hard work of only about 100 regular people here in Austin who decided this was an issue that mattered to them and to push their city council to do something about it. This is the power of local government. This is what can happen when people get involved. And it doesn't matter what issue it is that you care about. You know, there are examples of people making a difference on everything from economic development to animal rights right here at the local level. Because democracy only works when we get involved. In the end, yes, those city council members did vote to approve the solar and wind contracts, but they probably would have never taken that risk if they weren't pushed to do so. The system doesn't work unless all of us are participating. And if not, it breaks down. And history shows us that this is when we get extremists and out of touch and unresponsive leaders. And yet, we still see huge gaps in civic engagement, especially amongst young people. In Austin's 2014 mayoral election, less than 8% of people under the age of 35 voted in our local election. And that's despite the fact that Austin is one of the largest millennial cities in the entire country. So what's going on here, right? We see the impact that can happen from getting involved, and we see the consequences of not, and yet we still see articles like these, right? As a millennial myself, I know that these are hardly scratching the surface of the truth, right? I find them a little condescending, and I think there's something else going on here. I place them in the same category as truly crazy articles written about millennials like these. Right? This isn't the reality. There's something deeper happening. And so that's the question I started asking myself back in 2014 when this whole project really began for me. Because I know there's something else going on here. As a local journalist, this is really important to me. I work really long hours for not that much pay because I believe that it's important that we have an informed citizenry, that that's what makes our democracy works. And yet, all the time I'll be talking to my friends about something the mayor's working on or some new ordinance city council just signed into law, and they'll say things like, oh, we have a mayor, right? The disconnect is so large. And so what I started to do was just sit down and talk to people. I started interviewing young people from throughout the city and asking them, what are your opinions on politics, our news agencies, big civic groups in town? And in talking to folks, 3 big themes started to emerge as to that why we see this disconnect. The first one is an information overload, right? It seems like there's a million headlines flying across your newsfeed every day, and it can be really hard to figure out what's important and what you should be paying attention to. The second one is a lack of general knowledge, right? Who knows who a comptroller is, right? Or a city manager and what they do. And every city and town and state in the country is a little different. So if you move around a lot, it can be hard to keep track. And the last one is an unresponsive political system, right? There's this overwhelming feeling like, why should I get involved? Because nothing that I do will matter. And so I heard a lot of other responses, but those were the big 3. And so what does this look like in the real world? How does this play out? I'll show you an example I see all the time. Usually the way civic engagement works in town is some government entity wants to get people's opinions and young people's opinions about a particular issue. And so what they do is they throw up an event on Facebook to promote it that looks something like this. Anti-Displacement Task Force Draft Recommendation Forum. Public meeting for Longhorn Dam multimodal improvements. Sounds fun, right? Like, who is going to go to an event like this? It's hard to figure out what they're even going to be talking about. And so when you promote events like this, you get a lot of public forums that look like this, right? There's no one there. That's an actual photo I took at a public event. And so this is what I wanted to change. And so I ended up partnering up with two amazing local artists and designers here in town. Their name are Hal Wirtz and Jordan Shade. And we created this. It's called A Beginner's Guide to Local Government, and it's basically just an activity book or zine that teaches young people how to get engaged in this process. And really, all we did is we made learning about this stuff actually fun. We used humor and art to meet people where they're at. Because the truth is, young people, we want to be engaged, right? We want to make a difference. We want to be treated like we're smart enough to share our opinions with the people who have been elected to represent us. And yet, all along in this process of making this book, people doubted us. They said, young people are never going to care about these things. And our response was always, maybe that's because you've never really asked us what we think before. Right? Perfect example of this. This is from a town hall meeting the city of Austin held in order to get some opinions about some changes they wanted to make to our meeting process in order to increase civic engagement. So a really well-intentioned event. But the reality is, when you hold a town hall meeting to get people's opinions about changes to town hall meetings, the only people who are going to show up are the ones who always have, right? And those are the only opinions you're going to get. And you see this happening over and over again with government and big civic institutions in town. They're always trying to get young people to go to their events, fit into their system, instead of getting to the thing at the core of the problem, which is maybe the system itself. If young people don't want to go, there's probably a reason why, right? And so what we did is we raised $8,000 on Kickstarter from young people all over the city to print those books, and we proved the doubters wrong. And then in 2018, we took things to the next level. So here in Austin in 2018, we had a big bond election on the ballot with a lot of boring language like this. The issuance of $250 million in tax-supported general obligation bonds and notes for planning, constructing, renovating, improving. Like, I can't even read the whole thing. It's not that exciting, right? What does this even mean? Nobody's going to vote in an election when this is the language used to share what you're voting on. So what we did is we held a huge party. We invited artists and comedians, and we created a bond store where people could buy with fake money all the items that were going to be on the ballot in November, so that they could learn about it. And what we did is we took this and we turned it into this. And we held a big party and an event, and we ended up selling out with over 150 people, many of whom didn't even know what the event was. They were just showing up at the door saying they heard about it on Instagram and they wanted to come. This is the kind of thing that does not happen at city council meetings. And we were able to put on the whole thing for about $700. This is what we want to see more of. This is how you build a functional democracy, which is the name of the organization we ended up creating to do all of this. So, for all you in the room who have been proudly voting and writing letters to your city council members for the past 20 years, thank you for your dedication and devotion to civic life. And if you're concerned about the future of our country, the legacy you're going to leave behind for your children, or the very state of our democracy, I ask you to take a moment and consider what it would be like to truly invite the next generation into our political system. Because it's not just about holding a bunch of meetings. It's about creating genuine opportunities for real partnerships, led not just by you, but by all of them, by the young people in this room today. And so to all of you, the students, the millennials, the Gen Zers, know this. This is your community, your city, and your country. You have the power to make a difference. You can create the world that you want to live in. You are powerful, but only if you get involved. And if you think there are barriers to you doing that, change them. Make your own coloring book, build an app, run for city council, become a journalist, build a movement. And I'm not saying it's going to be easy, but the truth is, our democracy is never going to last if we don't all get involved in making it better. Now is the time for us to all build the democracy that we want to live in. Thank you.